Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to look at using the Canon PRO-1100 for making your own art prints. It's a very nice printer. I've got lots of videos and it's looking at details of using it, but in particular I have for this test I have some 17" by 25" paper. Now this is a size that is very rarely available in the UK. If I want to print 17" by 25, which is a useful size, and I'll explain why in a moment, I have to cut it off a 17" roll. Now that's not a problem because I've got lots of 17" roll paper, because I've got a printer that takes 17" rolls, an Epson P5000. But if I want to print on this, there's no roll adapter on it. I have tried printing roll paper on it and it will do panoramics. But one of the disadvantages of roll paper is you need to cut sections, and then you need, ideally, depending on the paper, need to leave it out somewhere flat to get rid of the curve. It will go through perfectly well, either this slot or the other slot. Now, I've had to move the printer forward here because of the space here required for it, even more space if you're using the rear feed. Now the two papers I'm looking at are some samples kindly sent to me by Red River Paper in the US. Now, as I say, these are not directly available in the UK as far as I know. This particular one is Palladuro soft gloss rag, and the other one that I'm looking at is the Red River Big Ben baryta 310. Now the two papers, any papers I get that what I'm using in testing like this, and instantly I'll be having a look at these papers, trying them on my P5000 as well, which would be interested to see how well it prints. Now I know this general sort of paper, so I don't expect any issues there whatsoever, but here are two profiling targets I made. Now the profiling targets, although I've sent these huge great sheets here, these are A3 plus or 13" by 19". Now this is my standard size for making profiles, and one of the things you can see from this, and I'm going to make a print in a bit, is the difference in surface finish. Now when I've done a print example I'm going to do here, we'll have a look, compare the two, because I've printed one already in the back here. I'm going to print on this one here, and this is the soft gloss rag. Now the finish for this one has also a relatively shiny finish. Now I'm hoping that that shows okay in the video, but it's a different type of finish. And if you're going to be doing your own prints, and I've looked at printing on cotton rag, matte papers as well, there's the matter of choosing the finish you want. Now the finish that works well, like glossy photo pictures, on small pictures like this, doesn't necessarily work as well on these. The problem is reflections become much more apparent. Now I've just recently changed all the lighting in this room, so if you notice the videos look slightly different, I'm still adapting to the new lighting I put in. But hopefully the colours should look fairly reasonable on this. Now this one here, I'm going to say this is the soft gloss rag, which is this one here, that's in here. This is on a rag paper, and it is, it's not a high gloss, it is, well I suppose, a soft gloss. There's a slight texture, almost a luster-like texture, but it's not even as glossy as a typical luster paper. It's also quite heavy. This one I think is around about 300 grams. I'll look at the specs when I get around to finish it. But yeah, it's a nice, solid feel. Do not underestimate, if you're selling prints, the difference it makes if people get a chance to pick up prints. People attribute more value to prints made on heavier papers. It is just the way it is. Of course, if you're framing them or presenting them in some other way, people won't actually get to feel the papers, so you have perhaps a bit more latitude. But somebody in the paper business told me at a show once many years ago that their samples, the ones that got the best look of people that people appreciated, were heavier papers. Now these are both heavier papers. This one here is 310 grams. As I say, this one uses the baryta settings, has to go through the rear feed. This one I've got loaded up here. Now, in printing this, how am I going to print images? First of all, to print this size, you need quite a high resolution image. The one I'm printing here is one I created. I think I was using Canon 5DS, so 50 megapixels. I've resampled it. I've done a few various bits and pieces. But the key is when you export the image to your print software, and I'm going to be using the Canon basic print software because it is so easy to use. It's also the same on my Mac as it will be on a PC, so for those of you using PCs, you'll be able to follow what I do here. Now, there really is nothing much in detail. You need the image at sufficiently high resolution. Ignore that old thing about images needing to be produced at 300 pixels per inch or some multiple of that. That is I'm going to say nonsense. So it's not. It was based on sound ideas a few years ago, but it's just simply not relevant these days. This particular image I'm printing, I think it works out at 551 pixels per inch. Now, I have done testing on lots of printers looking at printer resolutions. In Photoshop, where this image came from, I've specified the image size as 16 inches by 24 inches. The resolution is what it is. I would save that and print it, or I would just export it directly through PPL, which is the software I'm using because it really is easy. The key to getting good results for this is to have profiles for the paper. Now, the profiles, when you install them on your system, and many paper suppliers, Red River included, will supply profiles for papers. You install those on your system and away you go. Oh, incidentally, if you're wanting to print high quality stuff like this off an iPad or a phone, forget it. You can print interesting pictures. They do not in any way form what I would call high quality pictures. There simply are not the colour management facilities in devices like that for getting good colour reproduction. Also, if you're using CMYK, remember that although the inks in this, it uses cyan, but you lose lots of inks. Although the inks in this are CMYK, the device is an RGB device. So you need to print RGB files unless you know specifically why you need CMYK and you have the experience and the software to do it. In general, you do not need CMYK for any form of art printing yourself. Now, if you're sending off the pictures, they're going to be in books and things like that, then there's a whole different world of colour management. But if you are printing your own work, RGB is where it is. If you have a choice of colour space, and you know what that is when you're editing it, go for a larger colour space. It's a printer. Printers can handle quite large colour spaces. Depends on the papers, but there are lots of little bits. I've got lots of articles. Have a look at any of my reviews and you'll see examples of me doing printing. But the whole idea is this printer is good enough to do your own printing. Now, I've mentioned before, elsewhere, you really do need to use it often enough to make it worthwhile, because the proportion of ink used in cleaning and maintenance for this particular printer, if you only use this once a month, you're going to end up using quite a bit of ink in cleaning. That just gets used up. Now, the big ink cartridges, so you might say that doesn't matter. It depends also how much you're charging for your work. As I prefer, if I'm selling prints, I like the actual total cost of making the print to be a relatively small part. Most of what I would sell a print for is my markup, my margin. If you're getting someone else to sell it, well, you've got to allow for that as well. So you really do need to think about your true costs, the whole cost of everything. But from a technical point of view, it really is easy making prints on this. If you're sending prints out and you've got a sufficient volume, and you don't mind putting in a little bit of work to understand what's going on, then why shouldn't you make your own prints? I emphasize that putting in a bit of work because I'm sorry if you think that all this techie stuff is beneath you. Well, if you do, or above you, or whatever, if you think you can't do the techie stuff, well, I'm going to say you're probably wrong based on experience teaching, but I would say think about getting someone else to do it. nothing wrong with if printing doesn't work for you, it is not a panacea. But anyway, let's actually make a print. Now, the paper I've loaded in the top here. When you load the paper in the top, you have to set the guides, you put it, it's going to come out here, so let's just open this up a little bit more. It will ask you for the paper, and you do have to set on here. I prefer to set it here as well as in the software, just for belt and braces. You do not want to be wasting sheets of paper this size. They are not cheap getting sheets, large sheets of paper like this. 2 or 3 wasted ones, and well, that's quite expensive, not to mention the ink as well. So you set it here so that it actually specifies the paper size and the paper type. Now the paper type, although it's the particular one here I've got is the Red River one, I've used the Pro Luster media setting. The media setting tells the printer what type of paper it is and how to handle it and a few other things like that. The profile is what governs the look, the colour, all that sort of stuff, the quality in many ways. Now, the two are separate. They can be combined in what's called an AM1X file, which you can get from some suppliers, and you load that in, but there's a loading process, and anyone who supplies you with those profiles will tell you what the loading process is. You'll need the Canon Media Configuration Tool software. I don't use them at all, the AM1X files for this. All the testing I've done, I'm producing actual profiles, just plain vanilla profiles that you use for stuff. Now, the image that I've got is one that I took a while ago during doing some testing of a macro lens, actually, or close-up lens of some flowers. But anyway, just go to the computer and sort this out. Now, I've loaded up the image. Key things are, look at the margin. I've specified the size of the paper. I've selected the printer, obviously. I've set the media type to Pro Luster paper. Remember, that's the media type, not the profile or anything like that. And I've set the paper size to 17 by 25. It's one of the standard ones. I'm not printing borderless here. You can print borderless, it's available. And paper source is set as the top feed. Print quality is highest. Now, the clear coating I've set to printed areas. The reason for that is I want to make sure there is clear coating applied to some of the bright highlights of the flowers. Otherwise, you could get a bit of gloss differential where the clear coating hasn't quite gone. This is something that does vary by image, but this one, because it has quite a few very high key parts to it, I've set for that. Now, print quality highest, there is no need to go higher than that, it just slows everything down. In terms of alignment, I've told it to center things. Now, with the Canon software that I'm using here it's called from Photoshop, but you can run it directly and just drop the file onto it and print it and load the file. I've specified the margins. Now, I've set the margins here, and you can see they're around about 16-17 millimeters. The reason this particular size can be quite a useful one for printing is that 17 by 25, if you have a ½ inch margin all the way around, is a 16 inch by 24 inch image. Now, I'm using inches here. Okay, this is a US paper, so people are used to using inches there. I still think in inches and metric as well. But there are equivalents here, so I've had to set millimeters in the margins. But if I have a ½ inch margin and I can print a 16 inch by 24 inch image. What's special about that? Well, that is a 3:2 aspect ratio, and that happens to be the 3:2 aspect ratio you'll get from most full frame and APS-C sensors will give you that aspect ratio. So I can print the whole image on a sheet like this with a ½ inch more margin on it. Now, I don't normally bother too much about this. Well, yeah, I will occasionally print borderless, but not often, because this print would likely be matted, so I want a bit of paper around the edge. I'd make it a little bit less, perhaps, if I was going to be mounting the print, but it's this sort. Incidentally, the A3 Plus, or 13 inch by 19 inch size, gives you a 12 by 18 image. with a 1/2 inch margin. So that's another 3:2 aspect ratio, which fits what you've taken with your pictures. Now, I often crop things, so I print square, I print all sorts of different things, but that's a setting. That's one of the reasons 17 by 25 is a useful size. Now, also I've got in this, I've got the color management. Now, I'm set it here, color mode using an ICC profile. Printer profile we'll see is one that I've created, 1100, that's the name of the printer. RRPD SOG, that's Red River, Palladuro soft gloss rag, _ ProLus, that's ProLuster, the media setting. So the profile name tells me the paper name and the media setting, and then it says HQ just to tell me that I created this one at the high quality print setting. That last bit doesn't necessarily make much of a difference. One other thing I would note here, you can see there's something that says rendering intent. Now I've ticked soft proofing, which works moderately well here, and for an image like this it's worth checking whether the two options that you get in the Canon software are perceptual and relative colorimetric. Now I've selected perceptual here. You'll notice underneath that there is a use black point compensation button, which I have not selected. Now the profiles that I create, the perceptual rendering intent, already has BPC or black point compensation in it. I don't need to apply it here. Relative colorimetric profiles don't, so that may make a difference. I will at some point be doing an article and a video to support it, actually looking at black point compensation, which is a key thing that many people forget about when printing. For something like this with solid black in it, it might not make that much of a difference, but it really is about getting shadow detail and other areas. This we've just got the solid black, and then we've got the flowers. So I've got everything set here. Double check the settings, and if I just click on print, I get a pop-up box reminding me of the settings. It's always worth a quick glance through these, particularly with expensive paper, to see that you've got everything right. So here we are, paper size 17 by 25 or 43 by 64 centimeters, media type, that's right, color mode using a profile, the profile is the right one, the rendering intent is right, that's all okay. I click OK and it'll head it off to the printer. Now, it's a fast laptop, but it's a big file, and it'll take it a moment or two to process, to send the image, and hopefully, yes, here we go, it says printing. Now it will tell me, there we go, it tells me it's printing something called PPL2 and a whole lot of numbers. I really do wish that Canon gave meaningful names here. That means nothing to most people. Now, it's the only computer connected that I know is doing any printing, so this is obviously the print. But it would be nice if there was a bit more feedback as to what the name of the picture was that was being used. That information is there. Let's just move these out of the way. Well, there's the paper loading, draws it in. I say if you've got anything at the back here, and this is something people forget sometimes with large printers like this, is that they take quite a bit of space at the back, particularly if you're going to use that rear feed for this. Now, I find the rear feed on this a little bit clunky, but you need to use it for some papers. It does not offer a straight through print path, so you can't print on board, for example, with this printer. Some printers have a straight through path, so you can just have stuff go either load from the front, out the back and in, or that will just go straight through the printer. Not on this particular one. Now, this is going to take a good few minutes. It doesn't give you any feedback as to how long it's estimating or anything like that. As I said, this is a great printer, but you will need to put in a bit of effort to understand what's going on. It does not tell you, I'm printing this picture, and it'll be ready in 6 minutes or 8 minutes or something like that. See the speed the paper's gone through. It's not slow, but it's not lightning fast if you're used to printing small prints. Remember, there's quite a lot of area to cover there. But anyway, we're just going to leave this one to do its stuff. Well, the paper's coming through, just starting to show here. I can see that the margins are nice and even. The size works fine. As I said, I normally cut sections of paper. To cut off a roll for doing this, you really want to get a good quality roller cutter that will give you a nice square cut and allow you to produce your own sheets. If you're going to do that, I'd suggest doing a few of them and then finding somewhere where you can leave them with some weight on them, something flat that will do it. Interleave them with, put some tissue paper or something on the top surface so you're not damaging the surface. Handle them with a bit of care. My hands are dry and clean. If I was doing prints normally, I would make sure that I would likely use cotton gloves. It's not needed for everything. It depends on the market you're in. Some people get absolutely paranoid over stuff like this. These are just test prints. These will go into my collection of assorted test prints, and I will use them for comparative purposes and things like that. If somebody comes up and says, "Oh, I really like that," I'll give it to them. These are not specific prints, so if you are fretting over me handling prints and touching them with my fingers, get over it. These are not serious prints. Yeah, I know some. Yeah, I have had complaints in the past that I stand over and talk at prints, but I can see enough of this to see that I've got my slightly stronger than normal glasses on, so I can actually see some detail. There is a distinct sheen over this, which looks like it's a slightly speckled look to the picture. It's a diffuse reflection of the light. I'll compare this with the print done on the other paper once this one is done. But certainly, I know the colours, they're very delicate colours on these orchid flowers. The colours look good. The colours look good against the white of the flowers and also against the black background. Incidentally, if you're wondering about the black background on this, it was a couple of black t-shirts. This was set up, the plant was set up, the lighting, I can't remember which lighting I used for this, but it's very easy to do. A lot of, doing pictures like this, it's thinking about them, thinking about the lighting, thinking about the depth you want. You'll notice on this image, I haven't focus stacked it. So almost all the image is slightly out of focus. The only sharp bits, and these are the only bits where I have applied additional sharpening when I was editing, are the details of a few flowers. At this scale, you can see detail in the flowers, and you can see the very large cell structure that you get in the leaves of these type of orchids. In some of them, the softness of the rest of the image gives it depth. If I'd focus stacked this, for example, and the entire thing was perfectly sharp, it would look slightly wrong. You want to use sharpening to draw people's attention to aspects of prints. Now, this is a purely decorative print. It was not it was created when I was testing a lens, but I just decided that I liked the look of the picture afterwards. But when you are printing any form of artwork of that, and it's going to be viewed at this size, even more so when it's viewed larger, remember that people view larger sheets like this from further away. Now, that changes how we see reflections. It's one of the reasons very glossy prints don't work so well like this, because if you stand close to them, if you're close to them, the reflection is likely to be out of focus. Whereas further away, the chances of the reflections being slightly sharper. It's just distances and how you see things. But it does mean that for larger prints, you might want to think of changing your paper that you use. You might want a print that works as a glossy print at that big, may work better on a baryta or a luster paper at that size. And at that size, some prints I found look better on a matte paper. Now, matte papers have a much smaller dynamic range. Dynamic range is the difference in brightness between this, which is blackest black, and the lightest parts of the image. That's your dynamic range. Now, it's always much less on a print than it is on a screen, and it's even less if you print using a matte paper. But some images don't need that dynamic range, and this is part of where it comes in, finding out, you know, what paper am I going to use for something. Now, this particular one, I had these two papers to test, the two Red River ones, and I wanted an image which fitted in as an art type print that I knew would work on a paper like this. The sharpness in this doesn't work quite so well on a matte paper. Almost all of that is due to the fact that the blacks you get on the phototype papers here, or the baryta paper, and this, you know, glossy rag paper, the blacks are much deeper. It makes a phenomenal difference for some pictures. Now, I've got architectural pictures that I'll print, particularly if they're taken, if they've got stonework in them and things like that, where I do not want this strong contrasty look, and that's where I might look at a matte paper. You've also, if you're printing your own artwork, think of how it fits what you want people to see in the picture. You don't have to use huge, great sheets like this. Bear in mind what I said though about small sizes and looking at how you look at things differently. So if need be, just print a small section on an A4 sheet or something like that. Print a small section so that you view that at the distance you'd look. Also think about lighting. Now at the moment we've got LED spots in the ceiling here. These are 4000K lighting. I've got another light over here just to fill things in, and random lighting coming in through the window here because it's a fairly bright day. But think about the lighting for your prints. Have a look at your prints under different lighting conditions. Get a feel for how they vary. You've got an immense amount of control over how the print comes out. All these bits about paper choice, different types of paper, say even matte papers and things. Oh, there we go. I always catch slightly up and I always think it's going to shoot off. You know, all these different choices you get about papers are yours to make to give your prints the look and feel you want. If you're prepared to put in a bit of the expense and the effort in experimenting and realizing what's going on, then it gives you a phenomenal degree of control over just how your prints are going to look. Now, there we go. There is that one. Now, I can just check for reflections. I think that's looking okay in there. So there we are. That's on the soft gloss. What does it look like on the other one? Well, here's what I made earlier. And here is the same image printed on the two 17 by 25 papers. Now, I'm going to just move these around and hopefully they will catch the light enough that you can see a bit of the difference between them. Now, if I'd done one on a matte paper as well, putting a print on matte paper next to a print on a paper like this, luster, gloss, baryta finish, the matte quite often looks much worse than it really is. So if you printed this on a matte paper and put it here, the matte paper print really would look a bit sort of weak and feeble. On its own though, it may look much better. With this image, I'm fairly sure it won't. Now, because of the specular reflection on this one, where I'm standing looking at this, the reflections from the lights and from elsewhere, this is quite a diffuse reflection. They're sharper reflections. They're not clear gloss type reflections, but they have a different look to them. As to which is best, I'm not entirely certain. Which one would I frame behind glass? Well, it depends where I was putting it, what the lighting was like. There is not that much difference. This one does generally look a little bit darker because it's not getting the specular reflection. So I might well go with this one here. But, you know, it's a matter of choice. And this is choice you simply don't get if you send your prints out to be printed. If you let people convince you that printing is some dark art that is difficult to master, then yes, you will be, I'm sure they'll be grateful for the business and they'll charge you suitably for it, for making this. So I can check the figures from the accounting software for this, and I can actually check the actual costs in terms of ink used and things for these particular pictures. But they are subtly different. In looking around and moving at, they both, because I've made custom profiles for them, they both look very similar. I think from a closer look, perhaps I'm thinking I like this one. I don't know, they really are that similar. Yeah, there are all sorts of subtle differences, whether you get papers with optical brighteners in them. Now, if you want a bright, colourful print, having a paper with optical brighteners in may well work better. But if you're selling prints and saying that they're using pigment inks and they're archival in some way, then perhaps you don't want optical brighteners. If you're doing black and white, for example, it makes a difference. There's the slight difference in colour or whiteness of the paper. But like all of these things, it depends. The one bit I can say is that the Pro-1100 with these papers works really well. The real work went into deciding to take the picture, setting it up, lighting it, a bit with the editing. Now, I have added some extra sharpening in some areas just to show the really fine detail in the print. But other than that, the printing is fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of having a printer, having the paper, loading the picture, and away you go. Now, if you've got any questions, please do let me know. I'll be having more on this Pro-1100 before it goes back to Canon. I'll be doing a few more bits of testing, different types of things. I've already got quite a few videos I've done on the subject. As I say, let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks for watching.